Basically, a little bit of review of stuff that JC already talked about. We have obviously a pretty big problem with invasive species in Puna. That's our big invasive species core, and Albizia is one of those. Very fast-growing tree, which is something that people are very familiar with here. Puna is a little different, I think, than the other islands in that we're not so much talking about watersheds. I mean, these trees are down in the areas where we have a lot of residences. So they're directly overhanging roads, houses, power lines throughout the Puna district and to a certain extent Hilo and North Hilo districts, South and North Hilo districts. So we do have not necessarily eradication, but definitely more of we have to find those high priority areas where we can control the Albizia. And we started, there was damage and people were unhappy with Albizia long before Iselle. So you already, these pictures are actually from incidents that happened before Iselle. So we had, people's water tanks getting crushed, people's cars getting crushed. Albizia was pretty notorious, particularly in Puna before Iselle. But Iselle really did, the work that JC spoke about of thrusting Albizia and the specific problems related to Albizia into the spotlight. So we had Helco, just the immediate response to Iselle, their estimate was that they spent about $13 million. And we had people in Puna who went up to 3 weeks without power. And if you think about just, we can all kind of get through a day or two without power, but 3 weeks is a lot. And most of these people are in catchment, so they're also dependent on water pumps to pump their water from the catchment tank to the house. So when you don't have power, you're also without water in a lot of these situations. So this was just huge impact on the residents here. And then about a year later, we had a one-day high wind event. It wasn't even a storm. It was just like a really strong winds. And HDOT estimated that it cost about $11,000 in their response. And that was in an area where there isn't a lot of Albizia. This was on the west side of the island where it's a small population. So, it's the economic costs associated with Albizia here are highly recognizable and everyone's aware and impacted in some way. BISC actually got involved with working on the Albizia problem before Iselle, so that started in 2013, 2014, working with Senator Russell Ruderman and the community in Puna, and there was a demonstration project that really kind of focused on could we do that interagency coordination. So bringing together HELCO, Hawaii Department of Transportation, for state highways, DPW, the community itself, the residents in a small area known as Black Sands. It's the Black Sands subdivision in Lower Puna, and really trying to map out where those Albizia were, which ones needed to be removed because they were hazardous trees that were overhanging residences or overhanging streets, and which ones could be treated. And so working with all of these groups to figure out how to best mitigate the hazards. And that was a very successful project. It was about 75% of the way done before Iselle came through. And this subdivision, which only had two in and out, like two exit and entrance to the subdivision, and they didn't get trapped in. So that was pretty nice. A lot of other subdivisions were hit a lot harder than this one. So that we saw the impact right away in a positive way. And we did, part of that interagency work. HELCO was definitely one of the best partners that we worked with. So we got a lot of their high priority areas done. So this was, I think, the beginning of 2016. I think this work was done end of 2015, beginning of 2016. And this, as you can see, this is just a buffer zone. So if you look on that far side on the left and the far side of the right, you see that there's still tons and tons of Albizia. And what we cleared there, or what we treated there, that's about 60 acres. So that's a lot of Albizia, and it's a lot of work. That middle part that's kind of blank, and you can see that there's stumps down on the ground, there's limbs down on the ground. That was removed by arborists because those were directly overhanging those high-powered electric lines. And then we created this buffer zone going back, I believe it was 100 meters on each side. So we did some of that work just this year. We finally started getting some good traction with Department of Transportation. So the Pointico extension, for those of you that travel from one side of Hawaii Island to the other, there's a new road. The Saddle Road has been improved over the last 10 years, and part of that extension had become very overgrown with Albizia. So we worked on that. So we've been working on a lot of other pieces of that mitigation approach, but the big one that we've been able to do continuously for the last 2 years, pretty much, is working directly with the community. So this is one of the things that came out of the Black Sand subdivision, was that there were a lot of people so impacted by Albizia that they wanted to get involved, and they also wanted to just figure out, how do I take care of the Albizia problem in my backyard and in my neighbor's backyard and around my community. And a lot of people prior to 2015, really prior to Zell, had tried to do something about Albizia. About half of Puna residents reported that. So that was a pretty big number of people that were trying to be involved in some way. And so we launched the Albizia Assassins program in March of 2015, where we've been going out to communities to work with them, to train them on how to use that IPA method to treat non-hazardous trees, and even how to recognize a hazardous versus a non-hazardous tree. Because we don't want people treating, and we do see this happen, but we don't want people treating a large tree that's overhanging a house, because those limbs are going to fall off that tree. So we try to teach people that, but, there's a lot of open land in Puna. And, you're talking about subdivisions where people have 1 or 2 or 3 acres as their home lot, and they can have Albizia on their lot that is not necessarily overhanging their houses. So we have a lot of sort of open space and open space around people's houses. So it's not, when we think of residences, we're not talking about houses up on top of each other. So there's a lot, even within residential areas, there's a lot of Albizia that are sort of in these big open spaces. We do, as JC mentioned, we have a monthly information session, third Saturdays in Puna, and that's a standing gig that we've had now about 3 years. So it's something that people can be there's an expectation, okay, this is going to happen, and we have a lot of support from the community center. And you'll notice in the background, this is a community center where this takes place every month. You'll notice all the Albizia trees that are right there that the community center has not paid to remove. So we get to have that as a backdrop every month. We also will do hands-on work days where we actually take people out and train. We don't do those as often, but we will take people out into the forest, which is not very hard. Again, these open areas of trees are right in the residential areas. So we go out and we'll take people out and train them how to do it, so they have a lot of confidence when they go home and are trying to treat the trees that are nearby. We also, working with Stanford University, Rebecca Nemec, who did some great work on looking at the socioeconomic and just sociological factors involved with this. And one of the pieces that she pulled out was, again, looking at those properties in Puna. We have about 5,000 acres of Albizia just in the Puna district alone, and finding that low-income properties and properties where the owners, there's no building and the owners are not around, right? There's a lot of space in Puna where people were sold property an acre or two in the 1950s, 1960s. No one's ever developed that property. And these properties that have not been developed, that have just been sitting, very likely to they're now just covered in invasive species, but unfortunately, particularly Albizia. And you get a lot of people who, come in here or call us up and say, hey, nobody's around. This property is sitting empty next to me. No one's been there for 20 years, and there's all this Albizia popping up, and they're not really getting traction with getting any kind of action on that. So that's one of the things that we felt was really important, to connect with people, the different laws on the state level and on the county level, where owners are required to manage those Albizia if they're overhanging a property. So we have a section of our website that's dedicated to this, and there's a bunch of links so people can learn more about those laws and learn the process that they need to go through if they want to report a hazardous Albizia. And we have seen that the state has come in, assessed Albizia as being hazardous, and has hired arborists to come in and remove Albizia. Now, that can take 6 to 18 months, and they're kind of Pretty, I want to say stringent with like how they're designating. Pretty, any albizia could be considered hazardous, but they do occasionally take down some trees. We have seen some action on that, so that's been a relief for residents who are dealing with this. We've been really creative. Hello?
That process for reporting a hazard tree, that's only on the county level, correct?
No, there's, you can also contact HIEMA, and that's the HIEMA folks are actually the ones. It's funny. So what the county does, the county will send out a letter, a really stern letter, but they have not really followed up to then take the trees down. So more or less, it's almost like a legal protection for the neighbor. So if the tree does, come down on their property, they can, on their house or something, they could then turn around and sue. But although the law allows for the county to take that tree down and then get a lien on the property, the county has not so far been willing to step out on that limb, so to speak.
Okay.
So, so we, Steve Sigler at HIEMA is the contact that has been sending out the state arborist once complaints come in to assess trees. And I've gone out and watched trees be taken down next door to people's houses and stuff on empty lots, almost always empty lots where the owners just never respond to any requests. So that's one of the things, up here in the upper left corner, we have, that's a specific subdivision here, that's Kalapana Seaview Estates. And what they did, there's a couple different subdivisions that did this where they really organized their volunteers and they mapped out their subdivision and they mapped out where the albizia was. And then they set about using the county tax map key map to locate those property owners, and send letters. We have the template letter on our website, sending out letters saying, you have this tree, it's a hazard, and we will take care. If they're small, non-hazardous, they're not overhanging anything, we'll go in and take care of it. And they got a lot of permissions back where people said, oh, please, we have no idea. And they even, in both situations that we were involved in, they were able to raise money from people so that they could buy the equipment and buy the herbicide and all that kind of stuff. So a very interesting approach. One other subdivision started their own nonprofit called Albizia Be Gone, and they registered it as a 501c3 and took donations to be able to do this. So, communities getting very creative. That bottom picture, we're working with middle schoolers. We trained 7th and 8th graders on how to treat trees, non-hazardous trees, and they loved it. So it's an easy approach once you learn it, and we've been very flexible with trying to give the communities the support that they ask for. And these kids, this is maybe a year and a half after Azelle, and so these kids have been very highly affected by Azelle, and they really loved the chance to kill albizia trees. This is the area known as the tree tunnel. It was the old tree tunnel. You would drive down, this is the main artery into Puna. You would drive down this road and there was this very tall and beautiful kind of tunnel overhanging the road of Albizia, and this is the day after Azelle. This is not a back road. This is not a tiny road. This is a highly traveled highway, but this is what it looked like the morning after Azelle. And so one of the pieces that we were working on was that a lot of people were noticing after Azelle that the Albizia trees were coming back. So there was all these down trees, and, we started organizing pretty much at the request of the community. We started organizing these Albizia assassin events where we asked for volunteers to come out, and we worked with, our staff worked side by side with volunteers along that tree tunnel road to take down big trees and also to do small trees. So we have a number of these events, and we provided everything that was needed. They just had to show up in sturdy shoes and long pants and long sleeves, and we would give them the hatchets and the hard hats and the herbicide and train everybody how to do it. And we're talking some massive, massive trees that were being treated, and then also walking along the road and trying to get all the little ones that were growing up. And that's that same road now. And you can see that the albizia are just gone. There's so many albizia that came down. The state cut a bunch, but we're going along that road and treating all those young albizia that are popping up. You can also see this is an area that was highly affected by rods. You also see a lot of the dead ohia in the background there. important things, like this is one of our contacts from Hawaiian Paradise Park. And so the communities get really involved in the ways that they want to. So HPP hosts us every month for that Albizia session, the information session. And they really try to push, they send out newsletters, and they really try to push their residents. I mean, this is a 22,000 resident area. So not all of those are occupied, not all of those lots, but that's how many lots are in this subdivision, and they're an acre. So it's huge. It's a really big subdivision. And we just have gone around to each community and worked with each community individually to train them and get people involved and sort of create that norm that, hey, it's not cool to have Albizia growing on your property. And so it's something that has definitely become something in Puna where your neighbors will look at you as a very irresponsible person if you're allowing Albizia to grow out of control on your property. It's definitely something here that is very visible and very much a social norm. We get invited to walk in the Pahoa Parade. We created this identity of Albizia assassins. These shirts have been really popular. We get people, we give them away to volunteers, but we get people all the time that want to buy them. We also have stickers, for water bottles and stuff like that. So that Albizia assassin identity was a big part of creating that norm and really just getting people on board with the whole idea that, again, this is a community effort. What is that supposed to be? Okay. And we do see the results. So in those areas where we've gone out and treated around the subdivisions, it's it's really visible. You can look there a few months later and, hey, look, all these trees are dead. And people can really feel that impact of like, hey, I did that. I contributed to that. Just to quickly go over the things that we did that worked, we were really flexible. So, you heard me say, oh, this community did this community did that. We didn't prescribe to any community, this is what you should do, except for the things like you need to wear PPE and this is how to apply a milestone. But as far as how they wanted to address the Albizia in their community, everybody had a different need or focus area, and we were very flexible with saying, okay, we'll try to support you in how you need to be supported, and letting the community really drive what that program looked like, being really responsive to anything that they were worried about, because, even though it's Puna is really big, and there's different levels of economic income in different areas and different subdivisions, and so there was a very different sort of application depending on that community. And again, connecting with community leaders, because it really depended whether a community acted to do something about Albizia, really depended on whether there was anyone in the community willing to step up and sort of be a volunteer leader. Without having that, one or two central people in the community, you really don't get much action. We go out, we do the training, and people take care of it on their own property. But to see that sort of either neighborhood-wide or subdivision-wide application, usually, and we've learned this through our little fire ant community engagement as well, really depends on having a leader, someone in the community who steps up and says, hey, I want to take care of this problem. And we just, throughout all of it, have been really transparent with the community and discuss anything they want to discuss. They want to talk about herbicide. They want to talk about impacts. We go there. Whatever concerns you have, let's talk about it. So that's always a critical piece of community empowerment. And, I don't know what this looks like now. I think this area might be covered in lava, but before it was covered in lava, I thought we had done a pretty good job with the community out there. I'm sorry, I thought Wally was talking to me. So that's, that's where we are today. And we actually have been a little bit on pause because of the eruption, which happened in an area that was highly infested with Albizia. But luckily, in the last couple of months, it looks like they've opened the roads and opened access again. So we're looking forward to maybe restarting some of those Albizia assassin programs in the future. That's it.